At the moment I'm going through a period where I'm writing differently to how I usually write, and so performing those things is quite scary for me because I think by this point people have come to expect a certain thing from my performances. So yeah, I'm going to dive in. I'm going to start with a small one just so we can get the ball rolling. I'm not going to speak to you for 4 minutes to start off with. So this poem is called Tin. Tin opener clicks its final twist and you smell dirt. Earthworms slide between knuckles, you shudder, drop can to floor, they spill, willing life back into cramped bodies, you lose the ability to scream. They are only worms, and it is only dirt. But you asked for nourishment, asked for help, asked them to reach the shelf a little higher, their intentions were good, but marketing missed the mark. You wished you could package yourself into the promo, now perished. You swallow, they scatter. Find crevices, creep into holes, the circle of life once told you cannot go back now. Pick up empty can, hoping tin edges cannot puncture skin. Blood and earth mixed in raise demons, and you do not need more demons. You rinse tin under tap, reuse, recycle, good like that, condemn it back to new life. Not as lucky as can, you keep calm and carry on, but still smell dirt. Go on. Thank you.
What inspired it? If you want to dig deep into it.
Yeah, I wrote this after I went through some PTSD this year. I lost a flatmate in December 2021 when I first moved here. 3 months after moving in, he died in our house. And so a year after the funeral, I had a sort of PTSD attack where my body just went into really weird shutdown mode. It went into this really strange thing. And I wrote a poem about that that's separate. And this was something that I wrote when I was basically like, this has opened a can of worms for me. This has opened something I thought was closed, and for days I was not okay. It took me a really long time to recover, and it brought up a lot of different things. So that was where that inspiration came from, and this kind of, as you say, fell out of me.
Thank you.
You used a lot of images at the start, and it looks like you just gathered so many objects together in that intro. Was there a particular reason, or is that a style that you were working with?
No, I think I just kind of went from the idea of tin. Like, I just, the idea of a tin opening for me.
Yeah.
Like, the idea was opening a can of worms. So that was just the imagery that I took from, and I just kind of went with that. And I think it was very visceral in my head when it happened. It was almost, I could imagine this happening point for point. And funnily enough, one of my ex-boyfriends once opened a can of baked beans that was mouldy, like back in the day, and actual like baked beans that are not supposed to be mouldy. And he opened them and they were full of mould, and that was another image that came up to me when I was thinking about it, because I remember the shock of him opening it, not expecting it to look like that, because with preserved food you shouldn't. So that's a silly little,
Do something.
I've got one that's like so the when you had the keep calm and carry on bit, and then also like and in your performance a lot comes through, and when you're writing and you feel, especially when it's something that's happening in real time, and then you land on something that's sort of, I don't know, like a phrase or an idiom or something. How do you handle that in your poetry, where you're like, okay, well this is something that people are familiar with, and the rest of it's sort of your more personal stuff? Like, is that something that you dive into? Do you shy away from? Like, what do you do with that when it comes in as part of your process?
I dive into it. I definitely lean into it. I love references. I love things that people can pick up on. I think it makes the work really relatable. Everybody knows what that phrase means.
Yeah, exactly.
So if that one again came quite naturally to me in the rhythm. It was something that I didn't really think about. I didn't think about placing it. It just happened, and I went, all right, I like that. And I like to use humour a lot in my work as well. So anything that can get a titter when it's not supposed to is always quite nice for me too.
Yeah, they kind of felt like kind of like an anchor point, and then like you could like take all of the uniqueness before, anchor it there, then come out from that, and then sort of like, yeah, I don't know, it felt good to me, like as a subjective, like kind of rhythm sense for the poem.
Thank you. Yeah, I like to break it up as well. I like to mix and change and throw something in that people aren't expecting, because especially when something is quite dark and quite heavy and it's got those kind of intonations, I really love to throw something in that just is out of left field and people just are like, oh, that was not expected.
Can I ask about the rhythm? Like, do you decide, do you have a rhythm in your mind, or is that something you can explore?
Yeah, so this is something that I find quite interesting about myself as a writer, is that if I show you kind of the how it's written,
You write it how you speak it.
I write how I speak it, and so my work doesn't necessarily translate to page very well because I literally write it as it comes out, and usually I don't change this very much. This is how it comes out and this is how the rhythm lands. And if there's issues with the rhythm, I'll go back and look at it and maybe do the whole like let's count some syllables and see what that situation is. But a lot of the time, similar to you, I correct it as I go, I self-edit as I go. So if something isn't landing quite right, I'll go, okay, let's run it back and try again.
And sorry, do you think that if somebody changes the rhythm, like somebody else read it like as they feel it, does it change the also the meaning of the poem, or do you think that just
I would be fascinated and terrified to see somebody else read my work.
nobody,
Genuinely.
like nobody never like.
I think so, I personally, I'm quite sort of protective over my spoken word because I love seeing different interpretations coming from things. I love that, but when it comes to my own work, I'm very much like, this is directly from my life. And so I'm not sure how I'd feel if it came out in a different sort of rhythm or pattern. But I think I'd also appreciate it at the same time. I think it would show me ways that the poem, right, like I never expected that meaning to come from it, and that's the whole point of art, right? So it's subjective.
Yes.
You know, some people have read my work and taken something from it that I would be like, no, that's not.
That's not what I meant.
Exactly. Like Shakespeare. Shakespeare would be sitting looking at all of us being like,
And would you be pissed if somebody like changed the meaning of like you meant something and I don't know, I got something else?
no, absolutely not. You know, unless you were trying to rip me off and use it, you know, going forward. But if you take something personal from something that I've written that is relatable to you and you pick that out of what I've written, that's great. That's what we're here to do. I'm here to try and tell a story that relates to people in whatever way I can reach out to people. So.
And I have another question. Why worms? Like, because I get they are like disgusting but they're not really scary. Like, it's not, you talk about demons and like, because like what I felt like it was something that it was demons like once, but then it was left to like it was left in the open air or something, and something happened and they evolved in something else which was worse, like something like dead bodies and deteriorating something. So it was not like the original form, like it was not.
I did not see that at all in my own mind. I got blown on it as well enough, right? No, that's really interesting because I guess I understand I think, you know, subconsciously that theme of decay is going on and the idea of maggots and worms and things growing. I get that. The demon stuff kind of came because I was watching a lot of Buffy at the time, and there was a lot of a lot of blood pouring into dirt, and I was like, oh, that's great, that's a great line. So, funnily enough, that's not what I intended at all, but yeah, subconsciously something like that going on. So, yeah, thank you.
I have a question. It's a weird one, but like all of these themes that you both were speaking about right now, like decay and worms, I think like they sound really moist, but when I know I went through that word really quickly. But when I was listening to the poem, it almost like made my mouth dry. Was that the kind of feeling?
I like that. I'm glad that happened.
Was that the kind of feeling that you had while you were writing?
Yeah, I mean, that process that I was going through, I was incredibly anxious and I had a dry mouth for like 5 days. So it wasn't something that I intentionally like wrote in, but I kind of, when I was writing it, I felt sick. So I think that's probably reflected. And I'm glad it had an effect. Really glad.
What I took away from it, and this may be intentional or not, I think it's clever to use the idea of a tin opener, kind of a very staple household item, one of the first things you would buy when you move in, shared, that kind of thing. But having this equal part of things that are very homely and domestic, but equally being really disconnected from it, and having that kind of that darkness through that, and having it side by side like that. I think I can imagine you standing in your kitchen, opening the door, getting the tin opener, and that equivalent in that way. Was that intentional?
No, but again, it's like subconsciously, you know, during during the time of the original incident, I didn't eat for 5 days. So when it came around and I was experiencing sort of the PTSD effects of it, I could not eat again. And all of those symptoms came up again and again, and it's one of those things where a can of beans should be something, like you say, that is homely and is lovely and people really love. And I just couldn't even...
Once you have that negative association with
Yeah.
it, you can't...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing out that justification. That's nice. I thought, oh, I'm alright at this. That's not good. Okay. I'm going to move on to a drunk poem.
Yeah.
So, this is completely unedited, and this again is something that's quite vulnerable for me. But there's a thing that I've noticed in the poetry industry where people talk and perform poems a lot, and if any of you have done a poem like this in your life, I apologise in advance, but it's just not my thing. Where people talk about being a writer and gassing themselves up the whole way through the poem, but the poem doesn't actually say anything. And I'm...
Echo is so majorly triggered. I didn't even see the face, I felt a tremor before.
It's also
Like-
a bit love.
You know,
Like when an older one got exploded.
we
by
are
Death Star.
here for authenticity and honesty, and it's you know, I am absolutely here to be open and debate.
I kind of agree with, like, you know, when they say that they're a good writer, but you don't see any of the writing technicalities in
Yes.
the piece.
I
Where it's
think,
like,
But I think it's influenced by sort of the braggadocio hip hop rap stuff.
yes,
It goes into that, which is cool. But the thing is, when people do it in hip hop, there is wordplay, but there's also breath control. There's all these things that show. Whereas when they do it in poetry, I feel the bar is non-existent, and they just say shit. And it's shit.
literally,
And
the
it's not
bar
to
is
say that
non-existent.
everyone who has ever done, you know, I'm not generalising, I think there are some very talented poets who have done it very well, but I think there's almost a theme of it, and the problem is there's too many people who are doing the theme of it and they're not really... And I'm all one for a story. I love I love an arc, I love beginning to end, I'm an actor, that's what I do. So, yeah, I wrote this on the way back and I can't remember what event it was from, and I'm glad that I don't remember what event it was from. And it's called I Have a Pen. And yeah, this is my first drunk poem. I have a pen, apparently. No, not apparently. I have a pen. I have a pen. Not a literal one, I can't lend you one, and not a metaphorical one either. I know this is a poem, but it isn't a metaphorical pen because it is actually a pen. Just not here. But it's real. Tangible yet intangible, and I know I'm not making sense, but this pen, it's in my mind. I'm not sure who refills the ink, because it certainly isn't me. Sometimes it's light like a quill, sometimes burns like biro. I really wish it were fountain pen and that I did calligraphy, but I don't think that's what it was intended before. You see, the ink bleeds through my veins, makes patterns in my brain, takes form and shape, arrows aiming to memory or fact or fiction or friction between nib and page. The friction is where it sticks, the sticky bits, the crinkly cracks of finger snaps and massaging of muscle knots. That's where pain meets page, via leaking coloured fluid from my brain. Is this making sense? It ebbs through me, with me. My entire body caked in ink. Not right now, I'm really fucking pale. And to suggest otherwise would be pretty racist, but let's say my ink is white like snow, like mists of clouds, or maybe it's red like the blood I bled for people over the years. I'd like it to be emerald, but that's fancy and expensive and you can't get it in WH Smith. But red. Or blue like the sea. This simile is getting out of hand. Where was I? I have a pen. A pen, I'm told. I don't know where it came from or who gave it to me, but it seems to work. People like it. People want it to make more pages of messes, of scrawled up bits of my head like a mind map made by toddlers. That's what my pen is. It's a momentary magnification of the mental manifestation of my fears and loves and hopes and dreams. I have a pen, and this means I am free. Free to be whoever I can in worms and rhymes and images and timing. My pen is the badass that I am not. My pen opened doors like skeleton key. I can see into your mind as well as mine as my pen moves faster than the speed of light. My pen is drunk right now. Confused as to what the fuck I'm saying and why I'm not asleep and not being just a normal fucking pen. Quite clearly never said that one out loud.
But you're right. So, I know you said you don't see how your poems translate to page. But have you tried?
Some bits.
Because in this poem, the pace is really important in how it's delivered. If someone reads it in a slow way, it will alter everything there is. And so, if you were going to explore putting it on page, what do you think you would do to make the pace, to include the pace in it?
I might just keep it all as one, almost. Like as one entire block. I've read monologues that are similar to that, where it's just there's no punctuation, it just goes. Yeah, potentially something like that.
You basically structure it like prose.
Wrote the other one.
I mean, yeah, this
All the way
is
down.
again, this is a similar. It's a similar thing.
So
You
it
can
gets
see I have a
around
very particular
The
sort of.
challenges of like,
Yeah.
what do you call it? What's it? Line breaks.
Yeah.
Line breaks.
I've seen a lot of page poets who have a spoken word background using like double slash, so you like break it up like that.
Yeah.
And you make
Similar
it
to
prose, but it's like it's laid out a bit like you do, but with the.
I do that when I learn it because that's an acting technique. But I think that is my acting technique, and I don't want that to kind of crossover. No, I think that's too much of a process thing for me to be able to put into. But
I think this poem is like a great example of how you are important to your poems.
Exactly.
Because you as a performer it's just you who can do this poem this way. Which is why I really completely agree with you when you say that your poems can't really translate to page. Because it's so much you than just the poem itself.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah. And I had another question though. So I felt like this poem was like so close to the kind of feeling I had when I was writing Peel. Does writing poetry or writing a poem feel like a toothache to you, that you just have to write it, or if you don't write it, it won't stop? Because that's the kind of feeling I had from this poem, you know.
It depends, yeah. It depends on the poem. There's definitely some things that I've just needed to get out of my brain, and as I said, this one I drunkenly did, and it just came out on the bus on the way home, which is like the majority of how my poems start, to be perfectly honest. It's on the way back from a poetry event on the bus. So I wouldn't describe it as toothache, I don't think. I feel like that because I've got a bad wisdom tooth and I hate it. So there's definitely like a rush. Like when you're finished, so I was like a little nerd at school, and like when I came to the end of an essay and I was on my last paragraph, that sort of like excited, or the last 10 minutes of the exam, I get that kind of excitement where I'm like, I need to. But it's more of like an excited than toothache. But yeah, definitely similar.
Oh, so it's more like a positive rush than like a...
Itch. It depends. There was one time when I got out an entire poem and then it deleted it.
Oh.
And then I had to redo it on the bus again.
Oh,
and I managed to, I got it. I was really glad, but the stress.
Oh, and then remember how to do it. Remember what you wrote.
Yeah.
You know, if you shake your phone, it goes to undo.
I didn't know that.
Android. Oh,
iPhone life. iPhone life.
That doesn't work. She's trying to figure it out now.
Where was I?
I like everyone that writes a poem about writing usually refers to their pen and stuff like that. And the idea with the use of you mentioned blood and things like that, like the idea of the pen not only being a vessel for your writing, but also yourself as the vessel, because you talk about blood as well, so you essentially are the metaphorical pen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because
So-
the thing is, as much as you said that in terms of technicality of the ones that you've seen don't have that technical, yours does. So you've taken.
Do you think? I read this when I was drunk.
What I mean to say is,
Yeah.
you've taken every kind of writing stereotype, if you like, and it's like you're commenting on it or subverting it.
Wow.
So you're taking the stereotype of writing is freedom, or anyone. There's so many that you've got in there. Probably I can't remember all of them. I'll say 8 or 9 at least.
Wow.
Where you're taking the concept of what most people commonly say about writing, so the idea of blood, all of these other things, but you've still got technicalities in there. So like the line about the blood, the line about the manifestation, writing what you want, having those certain powers. I don't know if you've done that intentionally, but it worked out.
Well, thank you. No, I appreciate that very, very highly.
It feels like that thing where I think they say that if you know how to dance, you can't dance wrong to a beat. Like even if you try to do it yourself, you can't do it.
It's
You
thing called
somehow
rhythm.
just
Or dropping
Rhythm.
Left, right, centre.
But it's like as soon as you try to do something off it, you just find yourself fall back into beat.
Very
And
dangerous.
it seems like you tried to do that in this poem. You went to a night, you saw people do that. I'm the best poet in the world type thing, and they just said nothing, and you tried to write like that and kept falling back into the rhythm and the technicality that it needs.
It's so interesting because as I was reading it, I was like, oh no, I've just gone and written another fucking pen poem. I was like, I've just become one of those guys. That's fine.
No, but the thing, because like for example, you mentioned calligraphy, and
Yeah.
all of those kind of really overtly bragging ones will pick the best of the best or whatever, and this is something that you could perhaps work on if you wanted to, of picking something that's quite standard. So the pens that have more than one colour in them, or like a Bic pen. What if you were a Bic pen? What would you be like? If you were a particular, obviously you've talked about colours already, but if you took brands of pens,
Brands
and
is
said
a
if
really good
I
idea.
was
Really good
this
idea.
kind of branded pen, what would if I was a papermate pen, how would I do it?
No, you know this comes down to fundamentally is show versus tell.
Yeah.
And I think the kind of poets that you're talking about, they tell, but there's
They don't
no
show.
demonstration
Yeah.
whatsoever.
It's not shown in the work of the body of the poem, where
Yes.
they're saying they're good at writing, but then where is it on the page? Alliteration, meter, all that
All of
stuff,
that, the
imagery.
technicalities, but you have that.
Yeah.
I will take the brand thing.
It's just an idea.
No,
but
it's
then
great. I think
you
I
can
think that's a good idea.
you can add, so in the bit where you talk about the calligraphy, so when you go back to oh no, I'm just a pen, I'm just a pen, then you can weave that in, or then okay, but and then you can have it as different stanzas. If I was a papermate pen, if I was a Bic pen, if I was a, and then subvert it back round.
You could also drill down into maybe like the techniques of calligraphy if you wanted to like just
If you wanna be fancy.
see different types of. You can kind of drill down.
Absolutely.
I'm sure there's different ways like to arc a thing or whatever, like make things look pretty. So I think you can
I'm just gonna list random.
intermarry those things.
I wasn't going to edit this one, but now I'm really intrigued. I like that idea.
All kinds of pages.
A scalpel.
I quite often think of those pen poems. It's a bit like, you know how you get that guidance about writing poetry and they say, oh, you go back to your poem, you take out the first 2 lines and it'll be better.
Yeah.
It's sort of like almost like you need to warm yourself up into it. I feel like those pen poems are quite often like, you know, walkout music. Like, and you sort of need it, like when you're putting that, like the first 2 lines of the poem, you're taking it out, you're doing the pen poem, like, and you can just put your like energy in it, and then you can do the rest of it. Like, you know, if you had an anthology or something, it would be your warm music.
So I saw a prompt the other day, which is where do poets go to weep? And that would be a perfect response for that.
Interesting.
That's good.
Alright.
Where do poets go to?
So poets and the writers in the room, that's your prompt.
Yeah, where do poets go to
Where
weep?
poets
Woo! Apparently at Guardians of the Galaxy 3, but...
Right now, you're right now. I'll send it to you.
Any other questions on that one?
Not a question, but just a comment. I loved it, really and truly. But I think one thing that, I don't know if it's just me in my head, how I listen to pieces, but I feel like the beauty of spoken word is that as an individual, you can then create your own world with what you hear. And and I think with you so far, from what I've got, because it's my first time seeing you perform, so this is great.
This is the worst time to see me perform.
No, it's the
The best time.
Yeah, this is my favourite form so far.
Ready.
my best time because I've gotten to kind of understand who you are in your writing, but not just that. What I'm trying to get at is in this piece and in the last piece, I always saw you in one space, but there's so much happening in this one space. It's insane. So like in the last one, when you spoke about a cupboard, all I saw you was in that corner. That's it, you didn't move from there. The cupboard was there, the desk was there, you opened it up and everything was from there. It zoomed in, it zoomed out, you zoomed to you, zoomed. Insane. In this pen, it was the exact same thing. But what I love about it is that it was just that. You didn't go anywhere else, it was just that, and it was refreshing.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. That's really nice.
I just love the fact that you went for other poets. I'm here for the violence.
Let's not put that on
Metaphorical
Metaphorical and literal. I'm here for seeing blood spill on stages. Egos brittle egos being just shattered like shards of glass.
He wants to.
It's, you know what, sometimes you're like, is this a safe space? And I was like, this is a safe space, this is fine.
I got a comment as well.
Yeah.
Oh, a question actually. Do you think the dynamic of your poem would have changed if you actually used the pen to write it?
Oh! You went deep, girl.
I feel seen.
That was insane.
I think sometimes that's like when we have. Actually, no. Let me let you answer the question.
No, absolutely. I think you're completely right, and I just feel blown away by the question. It's a great fucking question. Yeah. Wow.
This goes back to
Second edit, write my pen and then see what happens.
But if it's okay to put this question to the whole room, anyone who writes here, do you not feel that
Oh, it's different.
when you're typing,
It's different.
as opposed to hand on the page with a pen,
Yeah.
what you produce is different?
Absolutely.
I have to type to keep up with my brain.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I hear that.
Yeah.
So,
And I also use it as I journal a lot, as you can probably see from this, but I have to, with stuff like that poem that came very quickly to me, I have to be like, you know. Go on, you were going to say.
the reason, so for me, the reason why, and I think, I can't remember if I read it somewhere, I came up with it, but when you write, the delay you have in writing actually helps you construct things, right?
True.
And so if you're typing, no matter how slow you type, you're typing way faster than you write. What happens is when you're writing, you have this delay and there's a backlog of stuff you want to put on the page. It helps it change to a certain fraction, and so there's always something coming after that. Whereas when you type, you can finish the thought while you're typing, and then you'd have to wait for something else, and that changes the way you relate to it.
Yeah. You know, I do write, I kind of write with both ways. There are some things that come to me on the page and some that come on my laptop and some that come on my phone, and it's all I think it's a different relationship with each of those. So it's definitely interesting I do write them all out when I learn them as well. I hand write them 3 times. 3 is my lucky number. It's definitely food for thought. Any other questions on that one? Sure. No? Okay, so this is in progress still. It's not complete. It has a sort of finished form, as it were, so I can read through the full thing as it is without kind of stopping, to have breaks. And the problem that I have as a poet is that I don't think anyone can complete my story. This is my story, this is what I'm writing, so the gaps in it need to be filled by me. But what I hope for is that the discussion after this will then hopefully open some possibilities to it. Or maybe it's fine as it is, so we shall see. This is called I Have Not Yet Written of My Own Evil. have not yet written of my own evil, and I'm afraid I might be full of hate. A volcano at bay, simmering away, I am concerned I consist of nothing but spite. The Angelus to Angel, or a chip-free spike, I think I might be capable of that. Not a turf or a bigot or a homophobe, but burned by those that spurned me. Wherever the truth of that may lie, those I was quite simply hurt by. I do not want to forgive them. I want them to live haunted by their choices. Why let them off the hook when I can watch them squirm? I have been squirming for years. They deserve to dangle, be strangled in their sleep. No, I don't mean that. I take that back. I told you this was tricky. Sticking points trigger me. A reactive hate activated by actions I cannot equate. But do I hurt too easy? Take innocent feedback as personal attacks? Do I attract goodness just to push it back? Is this self-sabotage or simply fact? If I had less hate, would we still be intact? I do not know where this will end up. But trust me when I tell you, my envy is more than green. It is a deeper shade from the shadows that leaves cast. It does not remind me of forests or trees. It speaks of ghosts, of sticky tar, of did you fuck her and why do you not love me more? Of reading text messages behind his back and demanding answers every 5 minutes, of shitting on women and cutting off ties, of calling people cunts online. My jealousy is the stuff of nightmares. It would burn your eyes if you saw it written. It's funny, I speak of my own evil often, but don't pen myself accountable. Despite journals recounting lessons learned, I wonder if I have really learned, if we can really learn when our evil is innate, if our very state of being is bad, born bad, torn bad from the womb. I have not yet written of my own evil because it feels instinctive. It's a blur. Unable to see the truth beyond my own slurs, and honestly, I do not want to. But the names you would, could, did call me are shameful enough. I do not need tattoos on my forehead. They already blacken my heart. The thought of those cursive words coming clean in front of me, in front of innocence, the insecurity from a life lived with people I loved being stolen from me repeatedly. All this hate, it came from me. I have not yet written of my own evil because I think I am to blame. I do not know what the aim is here. I have not yet written of my own evil. I'd rather it never be read.
Buffy references, so that. But I love the don't need it tattooed on my forehead. It's already black on my heart. Like that was.
Yeah,
like, that was a sick image.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was my favourite piece of yours. And what's interesting is I'm starting to sort of feel like a through line in your work. Of, it feels, they sound like really dope monologues. Like it's influenced by
Just felt
acting.
like prose.
And what I'm really interested to also hear is that the more you go down this path of doing poetry, is that feedback loop two-way? Are you finding that as you do your poetry thing, is this stuff that's happening or you're picking up that you're feeding back into your acting that influence it, or is it bi-directional or is it just unidirectional?
I think it's definitely the bi-directional thing. It's a very interesting split because the poetry, obviously, because I've written it, the emotional side is there. It does not have to be invented. It does not have to be accessed. It is within me. It will do what it will do differently on different nights. You know, I will say one thing and then 5 years later it won't touch me. And whereas the acting, that's something that I have to access. It's something that I have to find. I have to find points of relatability because I haven't written it. But I definitely think, because I went on tour last year as an actor after having done poetry for like 9 months by this point, and it definitely impacted how I perform. I think my ease with performing as well. I think because this is so much more vulnerable than acting. This is scarier than acting. This is worse. This is the worst thing ever. No, the best thing ever. It's not the worst thing. But it's scary. It's a lot more scary. I get nervous every time I get on stage as a poet. I do not get nervous as an actor.
So I've heard this from actors because they said, look, we're saying someone else's words, or you know, we're just acting a thing. Whereas with poetry, it is you. It's you.
It's you. Yeah.
It's not. You're not wearing a mask.
No. And I think I definitely put on a certain element. I have a performance voice. I know that. I have sort of performance things that I do that are very much part of the image. You know, we were talking about brands earlier. Like I have a brand and I match that brand when I'm on stage. So there is a certain mask to it, but ultimately the feelings and the story are my own, and I am the kind of person that does not hide. I tell the truth of my situation and the truth of my story, no matter if people are going to like it or dislike it. And that itself is a really scary thing to do. You know, I did a performance the other day where I was talking about like fuck the Tories in a place where I was like, I don't think anyone's going to agree with this, but I'm going to say it and we'll see what happens. So there's that fear that comes along with it as well.
I noticed in this piece and I think the piece before it, like there's this, you have bits where you kind of like your thoughts interrupt yourself, like you interrupt yourself, and is that just kind of like how you think, or that's just kind of like, I don't even know how I'm gonna get, like, is that just something you kind of just tend to do anyway? Like,
yeah, I think particularly in that poem with the should be strangled in your sleep. No, that's definitely sort of an intrusive thought situation. You know, I'm happy to admit that intrusive thoughts happen. They happen to all of us. There's nothing to be ashamed of by them. They're a natural part of life. And I think I was really, when I was writing it, I was like, oh, that's a bad thing to say. You should not be saying that. And then I was like, actually, that happens and it's okay. So the interruption kind of came quite naturally. But I also think it's important to say the scary thing.
Yeah, I think so.
And then remind people that actually, like, oh, it's okay to think of those things.
I like that, and I would love to hear you kind of delve into those kind of thoughts, and then you can kind of like package it later in terms of like how that could be resolved. But just when you interrupt yourself, I would love to hear those darker thoughts,
and then
the side of it. And just kind of like delve into it, swim into it, and just kind of
like kind of enjoy.
I was just like, I was about to come to that because I was really expecting for that volcano that you mentioned to like erupt. I was expecting it to get like really graphic in the middle of it. But
you see, I think there's a beauty in that as well, because the whole point of that is that you're revealing yourself but not trying to. So that shows, so it almost leaves people like on edge.
Yeah, it's like,
you give us a glimpse.
Because I didn't know how far I could go with it. I think that was the problem I was having. I was like, because as the poem explained, I've had some horrible thoughts in my time. And do I go as far as I can go?
It's interesting because you can see it as a monologue, but at that particular point, I thought that could be a conversation with a friend. And even though it's someone close to you, someone who knows you well, and if you were having that conversation and then you're showing that self-restraint of being like, can't go that far.
I do write a lot in conversation with myself.
Yeah, but quite equally, that could be a conversation with someone else. I mean, as I said, it could be both a monologue and a conversation between two people, someone who's quite close to you, who would know you that intimately, know the way that you think, and you're almost being like, I said it, but I didn't mean it. You know, and you're stopping yourself from that.
Yeah, but then again, I feel like if you did that, then that graphic part would come through because you would actually.
You would go there.
You would actually indulge.
I didn't expect everyone to be like, go there.
If that was a conversation, they would probe you with certain questions. So the stuff that you wouldn't say, they would ask in such a way that that volcano would happen.
Interesting.
It would have to erupt because they push the question. And you can't avoid, if you were having that conversation with yourself, you probably wouldn't go that far. You perhaps wouldn't even entertain that thought at all. But when the question is forced on you and you have to answer it, that's where the rest of the poem could potentially be.
Interesting.
I've got two thoughts. I feel like one of them is going to escape, so I'm just going to... touching on both of those points, it could be that because one thing to not forget here, even for yourself, and I think you never will, is that this is for you. So write that gruesome piece. You can reveal it to us.
We're so here for it, right?
You're so here for it.
I'll put it on the email.
Guys, tell me. But I think doing it in that way, and please forgive me, what's your name?
Chani.
The way Chani was saying how like have that conversation with your friend, I think it's worth exploring it in a more 3D aspect. So record yourself doing it. Or the vision that came to my head is you were being interrogated.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Like,
Interrogated.
As if you just
if
committed
you're
murder.
being, if
Yeah.
you're being
So then-
held accountable by someone.
Yeah.
Which I have been.
Yeah.
There you go.
I don't
Because the thing is, you mentioned your ex-boyfriend, and you know there are people in a way, in some way, shape, or form that would hold you accountable, but in a slightly different way. So they're close enough to you that they kind of know your boundary. But equally, if you had someone who's completely external, who has no
Completely,
context,
Yeah.
Which is what I view the audience as. Because in these situations when I'm writing this, I view the audience as that force, as that impartial body.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, obviously that's what makes me go a certain way, and they go, oh no, actually, because there's an audience there, and how far am I going to go?
And I was gonna say, but I think that's what we're almost trying to see if you can push
Yeah,
yourself
if I
to
can
that
go
extent where
Yeah.
in this one space where you don't feel like the audience will actually respond, what if they do?
so
And then-
that's written in a way like the audience are judging you, like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. Imagine if we were on your side.
Yeah. That's
I'll write that
interesting.
down. I'll write that down.
I thought it was even more. It wasn't even just 2 voices. It was like 4.
Yeah.
It's that
You
thing
can
where
put
you
different
go, like,
personalities like a
Yeah, you're line editing yourself. You're like leaning into a spirit feeling that you know you want to, but there's a part of you that's saying no. There's a part of you that throws it out and makes it non-specific to self anymore and starts making generalities. And then they're sort of like higher per point of it. And then there's a sort of almost like a narrator of like coming back to your point. And I I agree with everything that everyone said. It's sort of a bit like. Part of me is like, I love the fact that there's so many voices, that you've got a chorus and you're really into his head. It's a bit like what you were saying before about you're in the same place, but there's all these different characters in one person. But we have this conversation a lot. Like, Akko really likes an exuberant poem, and I really like an ambiguous poem. So I'm like something to be really sparse, and I really love the warmth of Akko's poem. And I wonder if you could almost make it 4 poems. Like, or when you're approaching your poem, does it have to be something that is got all of those elements in one? Or like, could each one be like what Meta was saying, like kind of diving into one part of the conversation, or that one persona, if you like, of yourself, as well as the kind of poems where you have them all together, where you get that glorious chorus thing going on. Like, I would be excited to see all of those different versions of your poetry.
But could each persona live without the others?
I don't know.
Oh,
That's another thing. I don't think you can. I don't think because they complete each other and they argue, and so if I have nobody to speak with and to argue with, can even hear.
So I agree with this. I think the question that you're pulling out about separate poems, that's something that becomes very clear when you see it on the page. When you see it on the page,
Exactly.
and this is, you know, an editor will say something like that, but if you're actually speaking it out, that's when it's like, no, it actually makes sense, because like you said, when it's spoken out, the different personas are interacting with each other. They're an ensemble.
Yeah.
It's the Fugees, right?
Yeah,
It's just Lauryn
it
Hill.
could be also on the page. Maybe it could be with different writings with different fonts, maybe. But it would be like you have to like tag each voice, and I don't know if it's
Like a
something.
script.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like how usually you'd have different colours for different people.
Like a performance needs some kind of friction and drama.
Yeah.
But like a poem on a page doesn't necessarily need that friction
No,
in the
absolutely.
same way. I mean, and the friction is brilliant. But it's sort of like you kind of like, I guess it's a page.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Like, for example, Caleb Fleming wrote a poem which is basically observing a young black kid getting taken. Getting taken down in a corner shop, but the poem is told from the perspective of 2 different CCTV cameras.
Interesting.
So
That's very cool.
the thing is, if you're going to put it on the page, there's different ways to sort of do it. You couldn't speak that poem out as a spoken word. Maybe if you were reading, which again, I think readings and performances are 2 very different concepts of poetry.
Agreed.
Do you have a voice in your head?
Yeah.
Okay.
How loud is it? Is it more than one voice?
Exactly, just one.
Getting very personal.
You are in sync.
Am I in therapy? Yeah, I definitely do. I have an internal monologue.
Is it a voice or is it something else?
So
Everyone has an inner
I will get
Like
deep
in
with
what
y'all.
form it is? Like
I will get deep with y'all. So I definitely have what my therapist refers to as a bully. And it's a little cartoon figure with a little stick, and he hits me on the head. And that is like the negative thoughts, the intrusive thoughts, the thing that says me, you should do this, you should do that, you should stop what you're saying right now, and you should stop what you're feeling right now because that's not a nice way. You know, that voice. So there's definitely
Yeah,
that
that's
in my head.
totally what I felt. It's just like you're keeping a leash on yourself, which
Yeah.
is why I wanted like it to explode. Once. I'm gonna keep poking that bear,
The reason why I asked if you have a voice in your head is that, I mean, it was clear in a poem that you were writing, when you're writing, you interrupt yourself by another thought coming in. Some people don't have an internal monologue, right?
I don't know how they function.
But has someone who doesn't have an internal monologue heard this poem before? Do you know if that has happened? And how do they respond to it?
I don't know. I've never spoken this poem out loud, so
Okay.
you guys, unless anyone here doesn't have an internal monologue.
Is there anyone here who
What do you
doesn't
mean by internal monologue?
I think everyone does, doesn't it?
Everyone
Everyone has an
one.
internal monologue.
I probably does.
I don't know.
the film I'm making next is fully like the main character is basically me. It's the most personal film I've made. It's all the shit that he's saying on screen is my internal monologue. The next film that I'm working on, it's very very different. But not in a poem though. I've never written a poem that's like an internal monologue.
So you don't have a voice like when before I say anything, before I do anything, and while I'm doing stuff, there's a voice in my head just talking about what I'm doing, having a conversation, just like narrative.
It's a running commentary,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, we're gonna have this bit in. Oh, those are pretty lights. Oh, that's you know.
It's a running commentary.
How did you feel about the poem?
The difference is
How comfortable does that chair feel?
I guess it's fine.
Fine.
After all of those questions.
I mean, I really enjoyed the poetry. I kind of probably appreciate it more as a performance, rather than those interrupted thoughts in my mind, because apparently I don't have a voice.
You lucky thing. Trade places now.
I think something like 30% of people have a voice in their head, so it's actually rare to have it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Only 30% have the voice.
That's what I heard.
That's
What?
bizarre.
Like,
That's very bizarre.
Is this
That's very
legit?
bizarre.
It feels like
I have to shut mine up all the time.
But it might not be voices, it might be like
No.
images also.
See,
Like
It's
sceneries and
I
stuff.
can see images too. I think that's a different one. But the voice,
I think I'm more than
Yeah,
two
but
standard
voice
deviations
was-
from the mean.
yeah, I don't know how it happens, but and it's really fascinating to see because the poem relies on, it uses that tool a lot, the internal voice and you're either saying something and something else interrupts behind, or you're writing something else interrupts during that. And so that's why I asked how those interruptions feel when you don't have, because you can't relate to having a voice just talking constantly in your head, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I do have like a voice when I'm like doing something, but it's not like
It's not conscious.
it's not permanently on. Like
Okay.
I sometimes feel like I'm just right now. I don't think there's a voice in my head, as I'm here. But when I'm like thinking about something, then that's when I'm be hearing. But when I'm speaking or doing other things,
Oh, you lucky thing.
Chloe, go for it.
I wrote down a bunch of stuff that came to my mind. I think my
Is it
internal
a
voice.
response poem, any chance?
No.
That'd be sick.
But I think it was. I definitely have an internal voice, and I think like my partner, he can see it on me. So like even when I haven't said anything, I'm just like.
So my daughter has this. She'll be like, "You talking to yourself?" but then she'll catch me like 3 months later, like, "You talking to yourself?" I was like, "Yeah, but my lips aren't moving." She's like, "Yeah, but I can see the cold moving in your head."
There's a conversation there, so it's like even when I think we asked the question of like not everyone has an internal voice. I was like, my internal voice said everyone has an internal voice. Just some have the ability to mute it.
Oh, okay.
Temporarily sometimes.
Yeah, and then like immediately, like from the poems that you performed, I think you've given me just such a really good perspective, and I think you're great. Like you're really great. It's like with those poems, it brought me back to one poetry prompt actually, and it was you are the storytelling. So you're talking about how you're able to tell your own narrative, and it's the conversations that we have with ourselves that allow our stories to be told. When I look at you and hear what you speak about, it's like very multi-dimensional, and it's like the parts of us. I don't know why, but I went back to like different TV shows, because you said you do acting as well. So like sometimes actors, they use it in TV shows, like Everybody Hates Chris.
That's a good.
You hear the internal voice speaking, even when it's like you and Netflix. You hear the internal voice speaking, and you merge this multi-dimensional part of you, the id, the ego, the super ego, the me, myself, and I, and they're all in conversations simultaneously. You say thoughts, and you also say second thoughts, and there's power in that. Hearing yourself, there's power in that. And we hear your thoughts as you pour it out, and the inner thoughts come out, and what I really admire the most is the rawness and the unedited version of you. Yet you're still able to work on yourself and let all the voices coexist. And my question to you then is, has it ever been a challenge to show up as your full self? And if it ever has been, how did you recover from it or overcome it?
For the past 27 years of my life. I only started really showing up for myself in the most authentic way about 3 years ago. Before that, I was in a series of codependent relationships. I didn't really know myself. I hadn't been single since I was 18 years old. So
did you
codependency is a real fucker.
It really fucks you up.
That's
why I've got a poem called Sober, which is about why not to be with people. Sorry, congrats. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Did the acting help you with
The acting did.
yourself?
I should not be scratching that. The acting did help. Yeah. So acting school, drama school was where I discovered what I wanted and who I was, and it made me be self-aware, and it made me understand that I had severe emotional blocks and severe repression from childhood. It got me into therapy. It got me doing the work on myself, and only since then, have I actually really started being able to listen to those voices and not only block them out, but parry with them and be like, the I should voice is horrendous most of the time, because it's a guilter and a shamer and a blamer, but sometimes it saves your life. Just silly examples. I was in a waterfall the other day because I was on holiday, and I could have done a little cliff dive, but the current was really strong, and my voice went, you shouldn't do that right now because you're going to end up downstream. Listen to that, didn't die, great. But then it's other stuff like, you shouldn't be eating that, or you shouldn't be watching TV and doing nothing in bed, you shouldn't be doing X, Y, and Z. That's the negative voice, that's the negative side of it. So I'm learning now to actually kind of allow them to be there and to listen to them and to pick and choose when I actually want to listen to them. And it's still every day is a challenge, and I think poetry for me has been the biggest way to be authentic and the way to speak my truth without fear of repercussion, I guess, because it's a free stage. And there's a lot of shit I say about past relationships that I would never have balls to say to their fucking faces. I never. But I will say it because I need to, and because actually I'm showing up for myself, and if they happen to hear it at some point, fucking great, come and talk to me. We'll have that conversation. But, chances are they probably are in a hole somewhere because they are sobbing over the fact that they left me.
Well, it's interesting that pretending to be other people made you Like,
More aware of
More
yourself.
aware.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's
I think every single human on this planet should go through drama school training
Yeah.
because it is human training. You learn to shed emotions, you learn to shed trauma blockages, you learn to get in touch with your physical and emotional body, and it is genuinely life changing. And you probably hear a lot of actor wankers saying that, but it's true. It is, and yeah, it was one of the most transformative times of my life.
Drama school.
Yeah.
And you need to come back to yourself after a performance. Like you cannot
Yeah.
be that person forever.
You can't get
so
stuck in it.
yeah.
Yeah,
You
I've
have to
seen
come back
people
to
get stuck
something.
in it, and it's terrifying, terrifying. You need to be able to click into it and click out of it, and realise you are you.
It's so nice to have certain rituals that allow them to sort of
Yeah.
purge and cleanse.
Mm. And I like the fact
Not
that
Daniel Day-Lewis though.
No, he just lives in it forever.
and I like the fact that you said that there are no negative like thoughts per se. Like it's like there's no unhealthy food. Like you have just to choose like the right amount and when and where and how to take it. But like everything is good for you if you know
I mean,
how
yeah.
to and
If you know how to turn the volume down,
exactly.
is the idea. And you know, for a long time I lived with that volume like on high, and it ruined my life. So you know,
Like
they're still there. Like, don't get me wrong. They're
yeah.
fuckers every now and again. But one more.
Yeah.
I've got time for one more. I was like, oh, okay. Okay. So what else did I write down? Hang on, I've got to consult my list. Okay, I'll let you guys choose what you'd like to hear next. A very toxic codependent relationship. That was very damaging. And my concern with it as a poem is that it's too self-indulgent, which is an interesting thing for a poet to say, because we're all very self-indulgent in lots of ways. And the other one is about girls and about female friendships and why, as an LGBTQ person, the transition from hating girls when I was younger to loving them now is an interesting thing. So what would you like to
Can we have the
hear?
latter, please?
And I feel it's like also what she wanted to
I mean, it's also the newest one, and it's the one I need.
Yeah.
I need feedback on it, so it's fine.
Alexandra's pressing the button.
Which one's more volcano?
Yeah, so this is something that I really do need help on because it's still in progress. It's still a work in progress.
Behave. Without
Okay, this is called I Never Liked Girls. I never liked girls. Girls were too bitchy, spread rumours like butter on toast, boasted about ski trips, tipping the class scales. Girls were judgy and wore Abercrombie and Uggs were ugly when we felt threatened. Girls were mean. You could never lean on them because girls were competition, one I always lost. No matter which girl, no matter if pearls adorned her neck or if she survived on benefit checks, girls were threats, especially if they were a reflection of this girl right here. Girls were a problem. Solved by brothers and boyfriends, kissing the wrong men in order to feel important. Girls were a sordid sort who I wanted no association with in the end. Girls hurt. Weaponizing words. Boys would break your heart, but girls would scar your soul, and we all know stretch marks never fade. I'm not sure if it switched when I realised I wanted to kiss them. They sure brought shame when I denied that flame. Girls were my most guarded secret. But girls now, they mean everything. They are effort on the empty days. A glass of rosé, a reach away, emotions tied into bottled messages, they will always bring you ashore. Girls are beautiful, not in ways that make me hate them, but in how their smile makes me smile. How their beauty makes me believe in mine, so willing to give their time, whereas men would line up to drop like flies when they couldn't get their hands on mine. Girls are phone calls cities away offering escape. They will collect you in a moment's notice from an active war zone. They are cuddles on sofas and hands held as hearts shatter. They have every single conversation about sex because men do not talk. They are pad thai, ramen and stolen cigarettes, line dancing and tit flashing and chilling in sweats. They are a 12-minute voice note ranting about their day. They are worth replying to. They always reply. Girls have treated me sweeter than any romance, bought me more flowers, taken me to more dance floors. I celebrated more with them than I ever did with men. They are care beyond plasters and kisses. They will hand stitch your wounds while slagging off the one that cut you. They will start fights in bars when they really shouldn't start fights in bars. They will scream lyrics until you can speak no more, thaw your icy heart time and time again, remind you what life is worth living for. Girls are fighters, striking stronger than Harry Kane. You best believe girls are strong and they belong together, side by side against the tide of bullshit patriarchy, because girls are fucking scary. And they scared me. I did not realise how tiresome it was when girls are heroes, without the twisted cream egg or the eclair. They are dairy milk, caramel, whisper and twirl. They are beyond any calorie count. Girls are carbs and wine and beer and stout. Girls, I am now nothing without.
That's a Harry Kane reference.
Thank you! I had to Google that. But
I was thinking like this would be an awesome like you know I was thinking like there was a montage in my head, and like this would be so sick for an advert for something. Like it would be so sick. I think this is a like undercover anthem for sure.
Yes.
So I would love to, like, someone needs to put that to film or something. Yeah, like that was amazing.
Was it finished?
It's not finished.
It's not finished yet.
Oh, okay, like yeah.
You wanted the volcano.
I also wanted to say
You got everything.
it kind of touches on that, like, you know, sugar and spice, all things nice, and then everything that boys are. And I love just the real good contrast. And obviously they're very personal in terms of like, you know, singing lyrics to the early morning and, you know, hand stitching that line there was really awesome as well. Basically, like, it's kind of weird, like girls you're supposed to handle with care, but girls themselves always handle each other with care. So I really like just the stark contrast between, you know, those two ideas of what, you know, girls and boys are, men and women. So that was kind of cool.
What do you think is left in it?
That's an interesting question. There is definitely stuff I want to edit. I am a big editor, I can be, and this is one that I would want to edit. I'd want to maybe tweak some words and phrases and bits and pieces there, some references. I wanted to expand more. I feel like there's a gap between girls were my most guarded secret, but now they mean everything. I feel like there's something missing there. Something, I started writing about it, and I think it's because personally I'm still not 100% accepting of what that was when I was younger, because girls were my first kiss, and I acted like that was a boy at 13 my entire life, and it wasn't, so that was a big thing. So I want to incorporate something about that part of the journey in it, but I've just not figured out how to word it yet.
Sorry,
No,
What
go
you
ahead.
just said, was that in the middle of the piece or back?
It is.
It's about midway through.
I think it's about midway through, yeah.
I know what you can do.
Chloe has the answer.
I love the certainty.
You can just shake the board. Just get my notepad. Alright.
Chloe's got answers.
Just like, I don't know, I just came to my head, I will just share it anyway. But it's a poem within a poem.
Yeah.
That
Ooh,
part.
okay.
But just the girls are the guarded thing. But that's where, just with a few words, you turn that into a acrostic poem. So G, the guarded part, being the beginning of how you spell out girls vertically.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be like full sentences. It could just be guarded and then something to define something with I, R,
I love
L.
acrostic
So,
poems.
yeah,
I
and
know,
it's
that's
like
great,
that
yeah.
across the page, so you define what girls are.
That fits
Using
my
that.
advert idea.
And then carry on.
Yeah.
Carry on.
That'd be so sick.
Great,
Since,
thank you.
since this idea has been spoken about, if you ever need a director, I'm here.
I love how you were subtle. Finally!
That's cool, Randy.
It was not my idea.
You feel of your place. Battling. Clash.
It's cool now,
To
I
add
lose.
an
So.
idea on top of that,
Okay.
because I'm so excited to, if you actually end up doing it that way, please. You already know the email chain is really.
We're ready for it.
Truly.
Yeah.
The reason why I was asking about that middle part is because when you said about your story at 13, I feel like even if you were to mention it quite briefly, it would be nice to see it like right at the beginning. So it's almost like your beginning of it. So, because what it sounds like is that one point where you almost were in denial with yourself for so many years. It almost carries out throughout the piece of these are all your so many years as you just keep going down of the piece.
Interesting.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does feel chronological. It grows with you.
Yeah.
Just to counter that, do you think, in terms of the storytelling perspective, because, so if I'm looking at this in a very sort of chronological state of mind, when I talk about kind of it, the idea of me starting being like, girls were too bitchy, spread rumours like that, the idea is that I don't want to reveal the idea that I like them until later on. So if there's a way that I could do that without kind of... That's my only query, is that as a storytelling perspective, my idea is that I like to surprise the audience. I like people to go, oh, that's what she's talking about.
But you see, I feel like you've done that well. And I feel like you can still keep that.
Okay.
It's now playing with all these different creative ways of doing that. That's going to be the very interesting challenge.
I think off the back of that, a lot of the stuff is relatable. It definitely resonates. And I think there's a few reasons for that, because you could have, if you did a straight comparison between women are like this and men are like this, you're not doing it in a way that's anti-men. Do you see what I mean? You're saying in a way that this is what women do.
Yeah, I'm not, I think I never want to be kind of anti-men with...
No, but what I mean is like...
Most of my poems.
Yeah, but what I mean is like, so the references you make to like female friendship and like other female relations in that way is I think if you want to push it in the way that you're describing, it's giving examples of those.
Yeah.
So the same way that once upon a time they were bitchy and now they're like this, it's having the counter for each one.
Parallels.
Having equivalent,
Okay.
for example, or it could be the first time, like, it could be you thinking about the thought process of like, how do they protect me? How am I made to feel safe by my friends? What do they do? So obviously there's stuff that you've already mentioned, but there are other things that I'm sure in your memory that you can pinpoint that this is when I knew that this person was here for me. And it really, really meant a lot, surpassing every other person or surpassing every other moment. This is the one thing that they will always be remembered for.
Oh, I've just had a thought. It's really upsetting, but it's fine.
Because the same way that you have that underpinning of like, you know, like for example, when you talk about like an ex-boyfriend of like, this is how they messed up. And I've seen poems like this, and like I said, it's really refreshing to hear something that isn't anti-men. It is showing that there's a certain way of allyship, because they would do straight on straight examples and say, this is the scenario, this is how the men in my life responded, and this is how the women in my life responded. And you're more inclined to feel a particular way about it, you're almost directed to, whereas you don't have to feel like that with yours.
Another 2 points on that is maybe that could be a completely different piece, or almost like a part 2 to this piece. You're almost like, this is almost like a tree, essentially. You're creating branches for it, and I think that's quite a nice picture in my head. Another thing I just wanted to kind of comment on is the sisterhood in that piece. Even though the intention of it, I don't know if you actually meant, I know it's to do with your sexuality and where you're at the moment, or where you've chosen to be. But for me personally, it's reflected a lot on sisterhood, and what I love about the piece is that it can be so many different things, but it never really loses what you're really trying to say.
Well, the point is the sisterhood. That's why I wrote it. So, for context, it's based on Memo Brown's poem about her best friend. She performed it at Soho House a few weeks ago for Poetry, and I went away and I was sat with 2 of my girlfriends, who I have at one point been madly in love with, but both of them are sadly straight with people. So
should I cut that out from the video?
They know, it's
Okay,
fine. They know I hit on both of them. It's fine. So I was sat with them and just so grateful in that moment. Like Memo was speaking, and I was like, I am so grateful for my friendships with my girls, and I didn't have that when I was younger. And there's a big reason why. I mean, I went to an all-girls school. It was bitchy as fuck, man. And there's, you know, obviously elements of that come in. And yeah, that was, it's more about sisterhood than it is my sexuality, which is quite interesting. So it's fascinating that you took that from it, and, you know, there is the sexuality underpinning it, but more it's like it's more exploring my fear of women and fear of women as competition, and the fact that I was always jealous of them for so long in my life. So maybe that's an element I could explore more.
But it was just very beautiful. I like the way it was done.
Thank you.
And I like a lot the fact that you define women without referring to men. So like
Yes.
they're not, because usually like if a poem or something empowers women, it's in, like a sort of a
It's framed.
yeah, I
In
know how to
opposition
say it in
to.
English, but in opposition is exactly two men. So these are one thing and these are the like in this one instead, like you define a woman as
All of
as
these
if-
things.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like nothing is related to anything else. Like it's like that and that's it, and there's no link to any other.
I also really liked the theme of it being exactly what it was without having to refer to anything else. I love that in a poem. For what I heard, and I don't know if it's intentional, is it sort of has multiple endings. Like I felt like for me there was a point where it's like always reply. It could have been the end of the poem for me. But I think like everybody's comments and what you were saying about what it meant to you is about kind of like progression through your personal experience.
Yeah.
And I think definitely we've all been there, girls' school, represent. Kind of like the sort of the first part is like the full-on stereotypes, kind of what women are, and I sort of wonder if first of all, was the 3 endings intentional, and what are your plans for like to use the different phases of the poem with all these cool ideas?
3 ending was not intentional at all.
I think it was 3, but maybe it was just my hearing. But
no, if you heard it, that's what you heard. I absolutely
So I don't know if
appreciate
that's something that might be useful to play with, and if you have an idea, like you sort of talked about chronology, and then you talked about like being more about fear and stuff. Like, do you think of the poem as phases, and where does each part of it start and finish for you? And then the other one, which is sort of, I don't know if it's a comment or a question, but like, presumably this process has not ended.
No, this is still very much ongoing. It's an interesting one. In answer to your first question, that process of the like figuring out the phase of the poem usually comes in the editing for me. So what I will do with this one, and what I'm still doing with this one, is looking at it and going, right, I love what I've got here, I'm loving the concept, I love this X, Y, and Z bit, but how, because I've already shifted stuff about in this and moved it from place to place. So then it might be, do I do it in this more chronological order like we've been discussing and start with that young experience, and then do I take it through the years, which I do like to do, or do I completely flip it on its head and do it the other way around? Or, you know, because that's what I like to look at. I'm like, can I do this in different ways? Because at the moment, all I know is it's not sitting right as a final piece. There's more to add to it. There's things to change. It's just, you know, when you just get a little bit stuck and a bit cemented, and kind of you looked at it so many times. No, you can't see anything different.
Also, like, since like this entire of the poem like is quite outwardly, because it's more about how your surrounding has changed, but I feel like there's so much that has changed within you too, so that I don't know if you could touch upon that a little bit in the poem too, which would be really interesting to see, because there's like a clear break of prejudice happening inside you, and if that comes at like in the middle point of the poem,
It's really interesting actually.
just like could give it a different kind of edge.
Yeah.
I feel.
Very nice.
Somebody actually sat with me and said, I thought you were homophobic at a cert a few years ago. And she's one of my closest friends now, and she said to me, you know what, because she was gay, and when I was with somebody, apparently I came across as quite homophobic, and it was because I was freaked out, because I had a fucking stunning piece of human looking at me and asking if I wanted to experiment, and I was in a relationship, so of course I can say yes. And I was in this really strange mode of figuring out things, and that's how I came across, and that for me was a real turning point, because it's somebody standing at you and being like, you're being not a good person, essentially, you know, and it's not necessarily something you're aware of, but that could be something really
But isn't it also an element of then, it's two things, isn't it? Which is, it's you kind of honouring the part of yourself that you, when you recognise yourself and seeing that girl, and also you as the woman. Now, you could argue that one of the things that made you uncomfortable is that she's looking at you as a whole woman, and if you're still trying to figure stuff out, you're kind of like, but I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
You know, and I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of that work in progress moment, and one of those things is the bit that's terrifying. It's like you see me as this whole woman, and I'm still trying to figure out all of this like other stuff that I hated about girls and women. I haven't fully got over that, and you could be the most loving person in the world, but I can't just drop this like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's super cool because it's like I don't want women to not be terrifying at the end because they're still terrifying.
Yeah, I'm still terrified. I'm still scared of them. Like, but in a way now that isn't hateful.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So the transformation isn't from
where it's coming
this.
from.
It's not like it's not hate to completely the opposite. It's like a slow progression, and in that is you honouring parts of yourself.
But would you say it's hateful? It seems like you were more scared.
Yeah, it's not.
I mean, taking it back to the other poem, there was definitely a lot of, you know, from the culture I was brought up in, you know, when I was like 12, size 0 was the thing, and women, you know, magazines were bitching on women all the time, and it was just a normal thing to bitch about other women, and it was a normal thing to hate on other women. And I think a lot of my jealousy manifested as hate. And it was insecurity, and it was jealousy, and it was me looking at people saying, you're what I want and I can't have that, so I'm going to hate you for it.
And also, it's not a justification, but you were younger. Like,
You
children
have to
react
acknowledge your
differently from
naivety,
like
your innocence.
And the society and the societal messages that we were given. And you know, my mum being you know, commenting on her own weight 24/7, on her own looks 24/7, and other people's looks 24/7.
Yeah.
You know?
No, because then your formative years of what you've grown up with and the experiences of those women has obviously shaped your understanding of them.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, so, you know, that element of being, because your mom was constantly focused on her weight, in one way or another you're thinking about you, and then you're looking at other people who have quote unquote better bodies than you and be like, I want to look like that and I can't, therefore, back to therefore I'll hate you for it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, it gets harder. Like it's like you like women more as the poem goes through, but it's more difficult to interact with them the more you go through. Like that's such an like that experience. I can imagine being really confronting, but like amazing poetry of like being like you're in that progression, and then you meet the person who's gonna like poke the bear, make the like you're like, oh god, here it is confronting me.
Yeah.
But she knows.
I mean, it's something that I'm still it's fascinating. I'm still going through it. I'm still working through it. Definitely better than I used to. But
I think even the bit where you make reference to singing, reference a song. I'm sure you had, like, if there's something from a memory, and again, it's just that point of being able to relate or resonate with something for the audience. Yeah, okay, and for other people that know, like singing with your friends is one of those things that that song becomes your song. Whether that be a person, a collective.
Wagon Wheel by Darius Rucker.
Oh, okay, Darius Rucker fan.
Something like that, just something along those lines.
Just came back from Nashville, bitch.
That's your International Women's Day poem.
Excellent. I love it. Thank you.
For the advert.
If we have future ones, you have to bring it back.
Okay.
All right. Next bit.
So in terms of structure, I don't know if anyone's watched Disney, and it's this short film, and it's called 21. And I haven't.
I've heard.
Yeah. So it's basically this girl. She goes out to a nightclub. She's 21, and she goes into the toilet and then like it turns into there's 3 different versions of her. So it's her at age 1, her at age 7, and her at age 13, and it's like this conversation, and they're all kind of fighting for different things. And then she goes out and she's wearing this long jacket, and all of the babies there, the 7-year-olds there, and it all adds to the age of 21. But like when I heard your poem, it was that similar thing of, you know, it started off being in secondary school and being the teenage version of you, then we heard from the young person version of you, and it's like, structurally that was really powerful. To think about, is there a reason why you use girl instead of woman or women? It brings me back to the idea of personas, like who is talking, the Does the person change? Does the person grow up? Have you lived to look back and tell the little girl version of you? And are you able to now redefine meanings of the word girl? Could there be a sequel one day to this poem where, you know, it's titled Woman? And the suggested experience that I had is, you know, you say you journal and you write, maybe it's worth looking back at those stories and those memories and those moments, because now you'll be able to look back at it and have like a matured perspective of what actually went on and maybe see it differently. And another thing is like just being in the presence of the women that are positive to you, especially when it comes to that second part. Experience them again, and maybe there'll be more to write about.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you.
What, or like even the elements that you want, what is it that you wanted to be about them? As you've gotten older, do you look back at them and think, I don't aspire to be like that anymore? Who would you look up as positive role models now?
It's every line that I wrote is pretty much a different friend in my life. You know, like, there was one, I can't remember right now. Like flashing tits is somebody flashed their tits to me on a birthday video a couple of weeks ago. Like little things like that. Like those little references are all very specific to people. But I like the idea of spending more time and kind of not necessarily naming them because I don't want to do that.
But you don't. But the thing is, you don't need.
But yeah,
you don't
making them very, very specific.
You don't have to, because all of the references is everyone can think of someone they know
They-
like that.
that's- yeah.
So you don't need to name them.
Amazing. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you
sharing.
to everyone.